Is there anything worse than being a cop in prison? Try being a corrupt cop in prison. This is Josh with the Infographic Show, and today we'll hear some of the craziest true stories of dirty cops who ended up behind bars. Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito were a pair of NYPD detectives so insanely violent and corrupt that they got the nickname Mafia Cops. The duo often moonlighted as assassins for the Lucchese and Gambino crime families. When they weren't using their police cover to commit every other crime under the sun, Stephen seemed to have been drawn in by the money and power of getting mobbed up compared to a regular detective's salary. But Louis was different. He was born into crime long before he ever joined the force. His dad, Ralph Eppolito, was an associate of the Gambino crime family, and his uncle and cousin were both made men who got assassinated by notorious mafia hitmen. According to a mob associate, Burton Kaplan, whose testimony helped bring them down decades later, Stephen and Louis were already shady cops when they started taking kickbacks from Anthony Gaspipe Casso, an underboss in the Lucchese crime family. At first, he was giving the duo a $4,000 a month payoff for inside information, but pretty soon he realized that cops could take down mafiosos and get rewarded for it. So he started contracting them to personally kill off his competition too. And it was a lucrative business. According to testimony by Casso himself, Stephen and Louis kidnapped James Heidel, a Gambino associate, and delivered him to his execution at Casso's hands. But the two detectives weren't just taking bribes, they were doing hits for the mob. And one of their murders ended up with a dead canary shoved into the victim's mouth as a warning. They also killed Gambino capo Edward Eddie Lino in a drive-by shooting in 1990, along with other more random killings like a diamond dealer and a union boss. When not informing and committing murders, they also engaged in drug trafficking, intimidation, and later a move to Las Vegas after retiring, where they contemplated killing off some of their former associates to cover their tracks. And then things got a little weird. Stephen Caracappa went on to work as a corrections officer at the Las Vegas Women's Correctional Facility. Louis Eppolito went on to become a minor celebrity, writing the hilariously iconic book Mafia Cops, the story of an honest cop whose family was in the mob. And after befriending Oscar-winning actor Joe Pesci, he started getting acting work, having small roles in movies like Lost Highway, Predator 2, and Goodfellas before starting work at a car dealership. It almost seemed like the Mafia Cops would get away with their insane double life of crime. That was until Burton Kaplan, the Brooklyn gangster we mentioned earlier, ratted on both of them to get his own sentence shortened. Both cops were arrested in 2005 and had the book thrown at them with charges for racketeering, obstruction of justice, extortion, and 8 counts of murder and conspiracy. After years of proceeding, Eppolito was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 100 years in 2009. Caracappa was given life plus 80 years, meaning those crooks and killers would be spending the rest of their lives around people they put away and former mob enemies they betrayed. It's some consolation that after years of horrific crimes and dodging justice, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito finally started their long, brutal sentences alone in separate prisons. Caracappa first went to USP Coleman in Florida, spending nearly a decade there before being transferred to North Carolina, already deep into a vicious stage 4 cancer battle. He pleaded with the judge to be given clemency, but given his record, it wasn't going to happen. Federal Judge Jack Weinstein smacked the attempt down, saying, "There is nothing I can do in your case." Cancer took his life on April 8, 2017. As for Eppolito, he was sentenced to United States Penitentiary Tucson, a high-security prison where he'd spent the last 10 years of his life. He continued to protest his innocence before dying of unknown causes on November 3, 2019, bringing an appropriately grim end to the life and times of the Mafia Cops. Some cops commit crimes in addition to being a cop. Others are true criminal cops, using monstrous and highly illegal methods to advance their policing career. There's no better example of this than the infamous Chicago police detective and commander, Jon Burge. He was involved in the brutal torture of at least 118 people, mostly black men. And when we say torture, we're not using that lightly. Burge's torment of his suspects often involved guns and cattle prods. From 1972 to 1991, Burge ran a gang of sadistic detectives that he called the Midnight Crew. If you ended up in his interrogation room, you could find yourself on the business end of a cattle prod, a typewriter bag pulled over your head to partially asphyxiate you, or the barrel of a gun shoved into your mouth in a form of torture known as mock execution, a CIA favorite. The Midnight Crew's brutality was so extreme it helped push Illinois to rethink the death penalty after it came out that at least 4 men on death row were there because Burge had tortured confessions out of them. He lost his job in 1993 after some of his dark secrets rose to the surface. But it wasn't until 2010 that Burge found himself on the road to prison. And technically, it wasn't even because of all the torture, where the statute of limitations had already passed. It was actually because he perjured himself in a civil case while claiming that he never tortured anyone. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He spent about 90% of his sentence at FCI Butner Low in North Carolina before being released on October 3, 2014, to serve the remainder in a halfway house. It would be comforting to think that Burge would have lived the rest of his life in misery and poverty after that, especially given how many lives he ruined. But he still got a $4,000 a month pension from the city, a city that he had cost a combined total of around $120 million. He died a little less than 4 years later at age 70. After Burge's death, many of his fellow Chicago cops and police union members stepped up to bat for him. The Chicago Police Union issued a statement on Facebook stating that it does not believe the full story about the Burge cases has ever been told. Dean Angelo, the former head of the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago, said, quote, "I don't know that Jon Burge got a fair shake based on the years and years of service that he gave the city. That was Chicago, and this next one, London. And it's only going to get nastier because he didn't target criminals. Sometimes a cop's skills that they pick up on the job can be essential in their side gig as a criminal mastermind. And there is no better case for this than blackmailer and terrorist Rodney Whitchelo, formerly a detective sergeant for the Metropolitan Police in London. In 1986, Whitchelo was one of the many officers attending a seminar about the rising threat of corporate terrorism. This is where organized gangs of blackmailers would threaten large corporations with tampering of their products in order to hold them to ransom. Whoever was holding that lecture had no idea they were actually giving Whitchelo a perfect how-to guide to put his own evil scheme into practice. Life wasn't going so great for Whitchelo. The small-time computer firm that he set up was going under, and in 1988 he was forced into early retirement from the Met due to struggles with asthma. Sadly, commendations for his exemplary conduct would not pay the bills. He decided to put the knowledge that he'd gained from his time in the Criminal Investigation Department and his pre-cop job at the Johnson Matthey chemical firm to good use. So he contaminated a bunch of baby and dog food. Specifically targeting the Pedigree Pet Foods and Heinz brands, Whitchelo put both deadly chemicals and razor blades into cans of dog food and baby food, resulting in 5 babies being hospitalized. And if that wasn't evil enough, he sent threatening letters to the company that he signed Romeo and Juliet, demanding payment to end his terror campaign. The crime spree, which lasted 26 months, put a huge number of lives in danger and cost both companies tens of millions of dollars. Heinz issued a £100,000 reward for anyone who could bring in information on the blackmailer. And this was where Rodney Whitchelo got greedy. He decided to play Good Samaritan and collect the reward himself, having no idea that cops were staking out hundreds of ATMs across the area. When he attempted to withdraw the money, he got snagged, and the whole sordid story came to light. He claimed that his fellow cops were actually setting him up, and that he was an innocent man, but that excuse didn't hold up. After a trial at the Old Bailey in London, Whitchelo was sentenced to 17 years in jail for his crimes. Given that he was an ex-cop and the targets of his crimes, he probably wasn't going to have a great time in jail. But here is where things get frustrating. While his appeal to shorten his sentence was rejected in 1991, he'd only actually serve half of his sentence overall. He was released in 1999, a move that caused controversy across the country. At 50, his hair had gone completely white from the stress of his time in jail, and he insisted that his rough time inside was enough for him to atone. After that, we have no idea what became of Rodney Whitchelo, and there's a good chance he might still be around to this day. A corrupt cop who served time that we definitely know is still around today was one of the worst to walk the streets of New York. When Michael Dowd joined the NYPD in 1982, there were around 100 murders a year in the city, and he would do very little to help reduce that number. He soon became a drug trafficker and an enforcer for one of the most powerful organized crime groups in America, the Dominican-American Diaz Organization. Dowd has a shockingly small-time criminal origin story. He was bitter at seeing how much up-and-coming crack dealers were earning compared to his own wages of $600 a week. So at a point, it seemed only logical for Dowd to go dirty. The first time he went up against the police code of ethics was letting off a perp who had thousands of dollars of unpaid parking tickets in exchange for $200 in cash and, now bear in mind this was the 80s, a nice lobster lunch. When he joined up with the Diaz organization, he was getting paid $8,000 a week plus a $24,000 signing bonus. That meant that he was actually making a lot more money than the Lucchese family was paying the Mafia Cops earlier. He was able to buy a red Corvette, 3 houses in New York and a condo in Florida. For Michael Dowd, it seemed like crime really did pay. He earned his keep by feeding police intel to Diaz while cracking down on all the group's rivals. That was until his outlaw lifestyle of money, drug trafficking, and alcoholism caught up with him. He ended up being indicted along with a huge number of other corrupt cops who were given the force an awful reputation. He was convicted in 1994 and spent 12 years of a 16-year sentence behind bars. But this is where Michael Dowd breaks the mold. According to his own statements, including in a Reddit AMA from 2015, he turned his life around while in jail. He claims to have improved himself by working out and reading, as well as working as a peer counselor to his fellow prisoners. And there seems to be some truth to this. After leaving jail in 2004, he hasn't returned to a life of crime, mainly working in media and co-owning a legit cigar company with, of all people, Adam Diaz, the former crime boss that corrupted him back in the 80s. But there's another corrupt cop who doesn't seem like he's going to turn it around. By the time Robert Smith retired in 2020, he'd accepted a cumulative $20,000 in bribes and acted as a shill, steering fellow cops and even car crash victims to a local towing company he secretly had a stake in. He proudly called himself one of the most corrupt cops in the 105, the number of his Queens precinct. But the dodgy deals and swindling were really the least of Robert Smith's genuinely repulsive crimes. He made a habit of stopping his cruiser next to random black civilians and pointing his gun at them, just to see what they did. He would text his friends about it afterward, laughing and using racial slurs. He'd refuse to give his badge number when asked. He'd hassle strangers and make racist and sexist remarks to his colleagues. By the time he wrapped up his thoroughly corrupt career, Smith had 33 official complaints levied against him. Once he'd left the policing business at age 45, he decided to take up a second career in dealing hard drugs, a career he hoped to start by approaching a pair of narcotics traffickers that were actually undercover cops. He openly said that he would carry his gun and old NYPD identification badge with him while committing his crimes. If this wasn't bad enough, he sealed his own fate when approaching a third undercover cop, where he paid $1,200 cash for what he thought would be a kilo of heroin. When he was arrested and stood trial in 2022, he was openly weeping as he said, "I did wrong. I had no excuses for what I've done. I know I've done wrong and I know I deserve to go to prison." But because there's no honor among cops turned thieves, he ratted on a few of his corrupt buddies as he went down, getting sentenced to 97 months in prison. His own lawyer, Andrew Frisch, has speculated that he is likely going to have a real bad time, saying that he'll, quote, be entering the Bureau of Prisons with 2 targets on his head. He is a cop and he is a rat. Now go check out Cop Goes Undercover and then becomes a drug-addicted killer, or watch this instead.